What if you could lead more effectively and go home on time? Welcome to the Lightbulb. I'm Zoe Thompson, leadership and performance coach, and each week I bring you 3 practical insights from my work helping impact-driven leaders transform from reactive to intentional leadership so they can finish work on time and take guilt-free time off, creating success that feels as good as it looks. Let's jump in. Time for episode 19 and my 3 light bulbs from this week's work. Now, I actually had quite a lot of corporate work this week and not quite so many one-to-one clients, just how it goes sometimes. So my light bulbs this week are actually going to be focused predominantly around workshops that I've provided. It's been a good week. I went to Manchester on Monday, which was definitely worth the travel, even after we spent an hour at Birmingham New Street on the way back. It was definitely worth traveling. You might have seen my post talking about putting yourself in different rooms where people think differently, people know more, but also inviting other people into the rooms that we're in. And I think that's really important as we work our way up, whether it's the corporate ladder, whether we're working our way up in business, that actually we remember that we had some help, we had some support to get to where we've got to. And actually we can be that help and support for other people too, and think about who we can invite into the spaces that we're in so that they can learn and evolve and grow, and also have the courage to step into rooms we've not been in yet. And my trip to Manchester was like that. It was about me speaking to somebody who has had their own incredible journey and has a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills, and really just being able to bounce around those ideas with somebody who has achieved more, achieved different, was definitely very useful. And on Tuesday, I hopped on the train over to Cardiff to go to the HR Disrupt. Would you call it a conference? It's not a conference, it's a networking evening. And it's for people who work in companies, but not just HR, other experts that work within organizations. The concept is really interesting. So every speaker, they only have 5 minutes to do their talk, and their slide changes every 15 seconds, which means the speakers are really fast paced and the topics are really interesting too. So that was definitely worth going to. So it's been a good week. Lots of learning for me this week, and being able to share that learning is always a bonus. So let's get into the light bulbs. My first light bulb, why you should talk to your biggest critics first and not your champions. So we were talking in the leadership development workshop this week around change management and how we lead our teams through change. And we were talking about the four steps that quite often people will go through. So we talked about the change curve first, the Kubler-Ross change curve, which a lot of people are familiar with. And then we talked through the 4-step model, how people move through change, in particular when there's a resistance to change. And we talked about those who are champions. We've all got them within our teams, the people who are really enthusiastic. They're really keen to be early adopters. They want to get involved really early on. And we probably have a natural tendency to want to speak to those people first, get those on board because they're the quick wins. It's nice and easy to get those on board. And actually, once they're on board, they will cascade that positivity and that messaging across the rest of the team. So we were talking about how we can get these excitable people on board first, get the positive thinkers on board. But we actually discussed the benefits of bringing in on a one-to-one basis, the more skeptical team members first, because when we can have those conversations with the biggest critics, with the ones who are more skeptical or more cynical, we can meet those blockers one-on-one. We can understand what their concerns are, and we can speak to them on an individual basis to be able to understand what the fears are, what their concerns are, what is it that worries them about this period of change. And we can address those on a one-to-one basis. It means that we're preventing any public confrontation, which we naturally want to do. We don't want to bring that into a team environment. Otherwise, one person's problem becomes everybody's problem. And so when we can get the more critical people on board, they can often become the biggest advocates. And so we do want the positive early adopters on board because we know that people will listen to them, but they will listen even more to those who are the biggest critics, the ones who are normally more cynical, if they are praising the change, if they are enthusiastic about the change. So it's really important to address everybody on those individual needs basis, have those one-to-one conversations. And if you've got a smaller team, I would strongly recommend speaking to everybody one-to-one first before you go into a team environment where that discussion can then take place. But start with the resistance, not with the enthusiasm. Have those conversations, listen so that you can learn, and then you can talk through those concerns. You want to acknowledge them. You want to hear people out. You want to allow people to have that safe space to share what their concerns are. Don't want to be dismissive. Don't jump in too quickly with your positivity. Give them that space to be very open about what their concerns are, and then you can start to address them. So that's the first light bulb. Second light bulb, 4 reasons why your team resisting change. There are 4 responses to change. So we have the blockers, we have the resistors, we have the supporters, and we have the champions. Now in light bulb 1, I've just talked about the blockers and the champions, but we also have the resistors. So those who are skeptical, focused on the risk and need some convincing, and those who are the supporters. So they're willing to try, they're cautiously optimistic, but they do need some reassurance. We've got the champions who embrace change. They see the opportunities. They actively want to support it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got the blockers. They're very actively opposed and have the potential to undermine any progress that is being made. So there's 4 reasons why the team can resist that change. And those 4 reasons can be self-interest, differing perspectives, change fatigue, and misinformation. So my second light bulb is more around the 4 reasons as to why they might be resistant to change. This will help us to understand what the real issue is. It links very nicely in with the first light bulb. If we're sitting down with a member of the team who is resistant or who is a blocker, then we can try to understand why they might be resistant or blocking the change. Now, it might be self-interest, and so they're looking at what concerns them. When it's self-interest, and this happens with everybody at a certain level, what's in it for me? How does this impact me? What is the change for me? And we're always looking at ourselves first. Some people find it much easier to then zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Some people get stuck in that self-interest. Now, it might be that this individual has very good reasons as to why this would concern them. So self-interest is the first one. The second one is a differing perspective. Now, what you think is a good change or what the organization think is a good change might be very different to an individual's assessment of the situation. If you've got members of staff who've been with the organization for a long time, or you've got members of staff who've been with different organizations who've been through a similar change, they're going to have a different perspective. And as always, with any team, we have different people with different world viewpoints, different frames of reference, and they're going to have different perspectives. So understanding what that person's perspective of might be very useful for you as a leader to understand better. Chances are they're not going to be the only person who is thinking that way. So the more you can listen, the more you can learn, and the more you can understand what their perspective is and what their assessment of the situation is, you might be able to feed that back into the project team or the program team or those who are implementing the change, and make sure that their concerns have also been considered. You can help to explain how certain decisions have been reached or what information has been gathered that might help the individual to see things from a different perspective. But it will also widen the perspectives that you have, and that's also going to be really important. Now, it might be that the individual has a low tolerance for change. If your organization is making a lot of changes, they're going to experience change fatigue. Very, very natural to, be tired of having to show up and do things differently. They will be tired of things not being the same. Change and doing things differently takes a lot more energy. And actually, changes in our environment, changes to a situation takes effort, and it takes a lot of energy. So people do experience change fatigue. So you might find that the individual has a low tolerance for change now. They've got that inertia to change. And then the fourth one is misinformation or misunderstanding. And this is why the communication of change is so important. How you communicate it, the level of information you share, being open, being transparent, being as honest as possible when people ask questions will help to reduce that risk of misinformation or misunderstanding. But the communication is really important. And when you're communicating those messages, clarity is really important. We talked about this in previous episodes. There's also a longer YouTube video on this as well. When we try and soften the messaging, we risk that we lose the clarity of the message itself. We risk losing our audience. So clear, strong messaging is incredibly important. And that's why a lot of organizations have internal communication teams who will manage that information and they will manage those communications. So all of these 4 different responses to change will require a different response for you to help to manage that resistance. Now, you can't move people through those steps. You can influence it, but you can't control it. And this is why empathetic leadership becomes really important. When your team is resisting that change, it's rarely just about the change itself. And that self-interest, how does it affect me? The different perspectives, how I see it differently, the change fatigue of, oh God, here we go again. Or as we say in Bristol, another one. And that misinformation where people are just translating the information that's going out in a different way can all influence how people react and respond to change. And how people react and respond will require you to respond differently as their leader. Okay, let's talk about Lightbulb 3. How to handle difficult conversations without making them worse actually came up in a client session when we were talking about customer complaints and staff conversations. However, I think the model works really well to link in with the conversations that we have with our team when we are managing our team and leading our team through change. We were talking about nervousness around dealing with customer complaints and staff conversations. And it was interesting that the individual first referred to these types of conversation as arguments, seeing them as managing conflict and seeing them as arguments. And we had a conversation about what their role is when you're dealing with a customer complaint or you're having a conversation with staff. What is the role that you take on? And actually, when we talked about it, and especially around customer complaints, the manager becomes the person who is in the position to solve the problem. So the customer has a problem and the manager is the person who is in the position to help resolve that problem. And once we started to talk about that, it shifted. It shifted how that individual saw that conversation. And whilst we still wanted to talk through a model or a mechanism for them to go into those conversations, they said that it felt different, that they were now in a position where they were able to help that person, not to have an argument with them, but actually in a position to be able to resolve it and be the problem solver. So we talked about the HERE acronym. So HERE, the H, the E, the A, and the R. Now, hear, empathy, acknowledge, and resolve. And this is great for any communication, being able to really hear the person who's talking. I shared my experience of working with the police, and see, with the police, nobody wants to talk to you. So every conversation has that room or has that potential to become more of a conversation that may be more argumentative, and actually how you step into that conversation can make a real difference. Now, I shared in my experience, don't interrupt them, let them express themselves fully, let them express themselves in a way that works for them. Some people will be sarcastic, some people will be loud, some people might cuss and swear. Now, as long as they are not disrespectful to you personally, it can be a real benefit to just let them get it out their system. Let them express how they're feeling in a way that is natural for them. It is not your role to parent that person and how they communicate. And sometimes if when we do that, that's what then shifts the tone and the nature of the conversation. So let them express themselves. Let them share what their problem is. Let them share what they're not happy about. Let them get it out of their system. Don't interrupt. Let them express it fully in a way that works for them. Then you can position yourself as the problem solver. You can show some empathy. So you can show that you understand. You can express your concern. You can share that actually, if you were in that position, you would possibly feel the same way. Show that empathy. Acknowledge the problem that they're having. And then you are positioning yourself as a problem solver to try and resolve it. So position yourself as the problem solver, but start from the place of agreement. So start with what you agree on, because you're meeting them where they're at. By showing empathy, acknowledging what their thoughts and feelings are and meeting them where they're at, you can start from a place of agreement, and then you can start to move towards a solution that works for both them and for you. Most difficult conversations get worse because we interrupt, and so we're not showing that we're listening, we're not hearing them, we're not giving them that space, or we try and jump in to defend either ourselves, our colleagues, or the organization that we work for, or we try and jump in too quickly to try and resolve it. And so we don't give people that space. The HEAR framework gives them that space to hear them fully, to show empathy for their position, acknowledge what they're saying, and then move into the resolution, joint solutions. Let them finish before you try and fix. Give them that space, hear them out, show empathy, acknowledge, and then resolve. And it works for customers. It works for conversations with colleagues. It works with stakeholders too. Hear, empathize, acknowledge, resolve. It's such a simple framework, but it really can work in so many different conversations where the communication is really important. So although they've come from workshops and from client conversations, they fit really nicely in together. So I've not just talked about how to get people on board, but talked about how to have those conversations and how we can empathize and show understanding of why people feel the way that they feel, and how we can help them to move out of that problem phase into the solution phase. And remember, we can't control it. We can only influence it. But the better our communication, the more likely we are to influence things to move forward positively. So another great week, another 3 great light bulbs. The calendar is looking busy. Next week, we've got the alumni meeting with the people that have done the Elevate Your Efficiency program. That always brings up great light bulbs. I've got meetings in the calendar with clients and also a workshop with an organization on resilience. No doubt that is going to throw up some great light bulbs for next week. But that's it for this episode, and I will see you again very soon. And those are your 3 takeaways for this week. Before you go, ask yourself, what's my light bulb moment from this? And now that I know what I know, what will I do differently? Choose one action, however small, and commit to it. That's how overwhelmed and reactive becomes aligned and intentional. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week on the next episode of The Lightbulb.